Hello and welcome to this week's review on Dragon Ball Daima. Today I'm going to be reviewing episode True Strength. It is the latest episode, and we kick off this review as we always do with these reviews by talking about the positives and the headline positives, all the things I enjoyed about this particular episode. I thought that the action was fun, vibrant and well put together, and I like the humour and puzzles that we had throughout this episode. Now I know that might not seem like a much of a muchness as far as the headline positives is concerned, because you do tend to do 3 of them, but I'm going to be honest with you, as much as I enjoyed this episode, I don't really feel as though I have much to really talk about with it. It's a fairly standard action-orientated episode, and there's not much to really sink my teeth into or really go in depth about, but hey, whenever I end up saying, oh, I think this might be a shorter video than usual, it ends up being even longer than usual, so we'll just kill through this as we feel. Unsurprisingly, as is the case for most of this series, the action is well presented, well animated and well put together. I know that a lot of people want me to talk about this certain matter that happened in the episode. I know a lot of people want me to talk about that, and you know what, let's just skip to dessert right now and just talk about it. This is the episode where Vegeta goes Super Saiyan 3 for the first time in the main canon, and as far as I'm aware, it's going to be the first and only time, especially if they decide to animate the Dragon Ball Super manga from when the TV series ended, which is it's a neat twist on events, and we'll discuss it in greater detail later on, and the fact it was introduced in this episode in the way that it was interesting. I'm going to be honest, I don't think it really added much to the action sequence itself, aside from fan service. The choreography, the presentation, the animation of the fight itself was pretty much just the same standard as what we had up until that point, so that is not to degrade it, that's not to downplay it, but the action of Vegeta's fight was solid. It was everything we come to expect. I think the earlier fight sequences we got from him were more spectacular and more visually interesting. They had a lot greater sense of dynamism and almost gymnastic flair to them, which is absent this week, has to be said. This feels more like a typical Dragon Ball fight, at least in the Dragon Ball Z era for the most part of it, albeit in a far better, far refined form, and it isn't just people plinking and plonking around the battlefield and just periodically appearing when you get some close-up shot with them going do 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 and all that kind of stuff. You get the idea. I know I'm a little bit facetious here, but you get the idea. We actually get to see the action here. We actually get to see the battle here, even if it does feel as though it's lacking some of the impact in certain moments. But aside from that, I do have to say that the fight sequence itself is very well put together. Vegeta's skills and abilities as a fighter are on full display, once again underlining what a different fighter he is versus Goku and what different fighter he is versus Majin Buu, who we'll discuss shortly. The other big thing with that fake fight sequence is, of course, the whole thing with Neva using his powers to make the Tamagami more powerful, which I don't know how to feel about that. I don't know how to feel about it in the regards to the story itself, and I don't know how to feel about that in just a wider review sense of it. Within the logic of the episode, it just exists to make the fight a little bit longer and to make it more of a challenge, and I get the reason why he's doing it. It's all to do with whatever his big plan is for all of this, whatever that might be. I get the feeling that he's going to try and do something, maybe not a power play in the sense of he wants to become the new Demon King or what have you, but it does feel as though he has some kind of idea and scheme in place, and he's testing to make sure our fights really are as powerful as he needs them to be, which this fight then ends up going on to prove it. The reason why I'm not so keen on it, however, is it does end up feeling so it makes the fight sequence longer than it really needs to be. Oh yeah, sure, we do get Super Saiyan Vegeta grade 3 or what have you, but still, it does end up feeling as though it's protracting it out for the sake of protracting it out, when from an animation point of view, again, whilst it is good, I don't think it's as spectacular as stuff we've had before. It lacks the innovation, it lacks the dynamism that I really think that we've had in earlier fight sequences. It just, again, feels like a fairly typical Dragon Ball fight and a fairly typical anime action sequence for the most part, albeit with better animation. Not as good animation as some of its contemporaries, but at least better than a lot of what we've had in Super. The other major fight in this, of course, is the fight between Majin Buu and his Tamagami, which, of the 2 fights in this episode, I think is just the more interesting one. It has a lot of the things I think that the fight that Vegeta had was lacking. It had flair, it had dynamism, it had creativity, there was a greater sense of just skill there, and it was able to get the Dragon Ball big tub-thumping power stuff done in a way which felt exhilarating, thrilling, and it didn't need to add some extra twist into it to make it any different. There was no need to make it so that this was a battle which had to keep going, had to be projected out, it had to be drawn out for the sake of making sure these two fights ended up around the same time as one another. It was paced out in such a way as that when it ended it felt like its logical conclusion. The whole bit where Majin Buu starts to throw a wobbler because he hasn't got any chocolate is a fun bit. It ends up underlining just what an unstable character they are, and it does, whilst it does have echoes of Majin Buu, it does have its own flair and different feel to it in what's in versus what we got with Majin Buu. Majin Buu seems to have more of a playful, kid-like attitude to him, whereas Majin Buu just feels a little bit more like a grumpy brat, so yeah, it's just a different way in doing it, even though it does feel a little bit too much like Majin Buu for my liking, but it does add a twist to the series of events, and then you get that sequence where he's running away from the Tamagami, just trying to get away from him, and then eventually he gets his chocolate, and then he gets the win in spectacular fashion, and I just think that there is a charm, and there is a quality, and there's an energy to this fight, which again makes it something that is more superior to the one with Vegeta, because Vegeta's, once again, is just typical for Dragon Ball, for better for worse. It's well put together, but there isn't anything about it which really knocks it to the next level. The humour and puzzles within the episode themselves was good. I really did enjoy it. Even though, I'm going to be honest, there's no way I could really have passed either of those tests after the fight sequence, though I did get the riddle that Vegeta did right, though my interpretation as to why the answer was 0 was because at the end of the thing he says, oh yeah, he gave away all his remaining biscuits to the snake, so yeah, he didn't have any left over. The one with the numbers, yeah, as an audience member, you were never going to get that because you don't see most of the numbers, so yeah, I think both of them work out well. I think that maybe having them both succeed is, well, I don't. There's the thing though, had they both failed or one of them failed, then we'd have to go through all of this again, and I think they're at a point in the story where we don't need to be redoing action sequences again. Though there's an argument to make that maybe the second, if Vegeta had got it wrong, then you could have another fight with him and the Tamagami later, and then they bring out the Super Saiyan Vegeta 3 thing and the superpowered Tamagami. But at the same time, like I say, that's repeating things. But again, the way that both of them put together, the way that both presented is good. I am surprised though that Majin Buu whispering the answers to Majin Buu was something that was accepted. I was expecting it that, oh, you got the answer right, but you cheated, and now you're not allowed it, and then Aaron Sue would have to figure out some other way in getting the Dragon Ball at that point, if Majin Buu is just too stupid to do it. At this point, I don't really know what they're going to be doing with those two, but it's hard to really say. Are they? I don't know. Is Majin Buu going to be enough? I think that fusion at some point or another is going to play into things, which means that these two probably are going to fuse, Majin Buu or Majin Buu. What happens with Aaron Soup, can't really say at this point, but we'll see. As again, the humour itself is fine. The bit where Majin Buu throws a wobble because he doesn't get chocolate and then gets chased around the battlefield, I thought was fun. It might have been grating for some people might not have liked it, but for me, it just had a flair and an energy to it which had charm to that whole fight sequence. Those aren't much really the same with Vegeta stuff, because again, it was very typical, but the whole thing of him trying to get the answer right in the little riddle thing that he had at the end of it, and everyone saying, oh yeah, Vegeta sucks at this kind of stuff, I did kind of get a kick out of. The episode itself is fine, it's enjoyable. I just wish I could discuss it in greater detail because there's not much really to discuss. This does feel like a connecting tissue episode, with it doing everything a connecting tissue episode should do. Where we go from here on out, I don't know, but it does feel as though the next episode is going to potentially lean into a little bit more of a filler thing, but whenever I've had that feeling before, we've got some major lore dump, so we'll see. With that said, however, let us get into the negatives, and my first negative is going to be one which, well, it's going to be controversial, so we might just rip the band-aid off and just get straight to it. I'm not a fan of the stuff with Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta. I know that this has been a much requested thing by the fan base. I know that this is something that the fans have been longing for and have been wanting for a very long time. I know it's something that has appeared in many of the video games in some form or another. But for me, I'm not a fan of it. It just feels like very surface level, vain fan service for something that at the end of the day, I don't think it was very really needed. the only reason it happened was because, well, it might well just be because of fan service. There was no other need for it. Had it been a case of, well, he just wasn't strong enough anyway, and that Neva didn't use his power to make the Tamagami more powerful, then I could see the reason for doing it, but it just feels like it's done for the sake of, oh hey, this is something the fans have been wanting for some time, so we're going to do it. But at the same time, bearing in mind where Akira Toriyama was doing all of this, I can be more forgiving, I'll say, of it happening in the here and now than I would be if it happened in any other Dragon Ball series, because it does feel like a case of, you know, him just giving a tip in the cap to the fan base and doing something they've been wanting for a long time. So whilst I'm not a fan of it, I can ultimately respect the way and the wish that was ended up doing it. It doesn't feel cynical. I will say that. Whilst it does feel like fan service, it doesn't feel like cynical fan service. It doesn't feel like it's being done just for the sake of doing it, just for the sake of earning kudos and grazies. Because if anything else, in this day and age, I'm bloody sick of fan service. But we've always got to listen to the fans, though. We've always got to listen to the fans, though, at all cases, all opportunities. Even if the fan base wants several different things, and even if the fan base has been wrong several times in the past, and their decisions and their demands have made stuff worse, we've always got to listen to the fans. That's a rant and discussion for all of the time. The other issue that I have with this episode is the fact that it feels just too much like a connecting tissue episode. For what is an episode where we get one of our villains getting a major boost to their schemes, and where we get a much desired, much loved and much requested bit of fan service, at the end of the day we're left with an episode which, of its own entity, of its own being, of its own making, just feels rather standard. At the end of it, I don't feel the kind of hype and wow that I would have done had this have ended in ended any other way. Again, this might be not again, because I've not said it thus far. Part of this might be simply due to the fact I'm not a fan of Super Saiyan 3 full stop, and the idea of Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta does nothing for me, and had I maybe got a little bit more out of that, then I might have been leaving this episode on a bit of a high, but aside from that, it just feels rather conventional. Arinsu now has one of the Demon World Dragon Balls. Okay, that's great, that's good, and by the looks of things, it seems that her brother just doesn't know that she's up to no good. But how that ends up relating with this stuff with Glorio, I don't know, because I thought that Glorio was also working with them, or maybe he doesn't know what Arinsu's really up to. I really don't know. We'll see where all it ends up going, but it's fine. Like I said, I think the problem is that the episode itself, it lacks... I think it's a little bit, maybe a bit too action-packed in that regard, so it doesn't feel as though there's much of substance here, apart from, oh wow, isn't it cool? With all that said, however, let's get into the overview and say that I did enjoy the episode for what it was. It is a fine series of two decently well put together, well animated action sequences. I think that one is better than the other, mostly due to the fact I think it has just more personality and a greater sense of flair to it, and the other one, whilst it is still good and it does something really kind of neat and cool, and it at least makes Super Saiyan 3 look less stupid, I think that, you know, it is still well put together. I don't want to seem like I'm ragging on it. I really don't. I think that the stuff we get with the Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta is still cool. I think it's still neat. I think it's still interesting. It's the best that Super Saiyan 3 has ever looked. But at the same time, it just kind of it does nothing for me. At the end of the day, it really does nothing for me. Well, that said, however, let's get into Comment Corner! It's time for Comment Corner, and we have Big X1 back once again like a renegade master. I should really find another way to introduce frequent commenters, but whatever. Their comment is, I like this one much more than the last one. I hope you're right and Vegeta isn't going to get cooked out of a chance to win a fight. This goes referring to the previous episode where it ended, making it look like Vegeta had just been jobbed. It really did. Like, I'm not one of those people that gets upset and annoyed by the fact that seemingly in every single major storyline in Super and seemingly the Super manga that Vegeta just gets jobbed week after week, a storyline after storyline. I can be infuriated by that, but then that said, I've not really read anything for these Super mangas, so I can't really comment on that regard, but I just had a feeling that that wasn't going to be the case with this one. I'll grant you that ultimately the fight didn't go the way that I thought it was going to end up going, and I thought that at the start of the episode they were setting up that, oh, Goku's going to get involved in some way because the Tamagami and the Kraken were both kind of working together. And then I thought that Goku would turn around and say, oh, that's not fair because now you two are teaming up and no one else is supposed to help, so knock that off, or can I join in too? Or alternatively, what you get are these that it looks like Vegeta's been jobbed, and then Goku steps in to continue the fight, and then Vegeta gets upset that Goku's not letting him get the win. So those two ended up fighting, which didn't end up happening. We just got Vegeta, well, getting a genuine win in, which is good, which is fine, which is great, and it's good. For all the Vegeta fans out there, congratulations, he's achieved something, and not only has he achieved something, he's also done something that many of you have been longing for the better part of 20 years, so kudos and gratsies. I mean, it's not for me, but congratulations, you got something you really want from your series. I just wish I could say the same thing about other series I like, but that's a whole other discussion for a whole other video series. Anyway, let me know what you thought about this one down below, and you will be read out in a future video. But between then and now, I say thank you all for listening, thank you all for watching, and see you next time. Goodbye!
Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!